Good evening and welcome to the Town of Cary Planning and Zoning Board meeting. Thank you for joining us tonight. I now call this meeting to order. Our board clerk, Julie Mitchell, will take roll call for this evening.
Thank you, Chair. For the record, I will verbally call in who's present this evening. Sal Camarada, Boshana Etten, Chris Johnson, Mike Roselli, Stephen Crutchfield, Sean McAndrew, Andy Coe, and Ken George. Thank you.
The Cary Community Plan will continue to be the guiding document for this board. This board's role is to function as citizens advisors to the town council who will make the final decision in all zoning activity. Your citizens' opinions based on the Cary Community Plan document play a very important role in advising our leaders. While this is a public meeting, it is not a public hearing. There is no opportunity for the public to speak. If you do have comments about any of these items, we encourage you to reach out to the staff by email or phone. You may also reach out to our board members by email. You may also contact the council directly through email or during any public speaks out portion of regularly scheduled town council meetings. These meetings may be streamed on Cary's website and or YouTube. All past planning and zoning meetings are available to view on YouTube and the Cary's website. The first item tonight would be the adoption of the agenda. Unless someone likes to make a change, would someone make a motion to adopt tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Next item is to approve the board meeting minutes from our February the 26th session. Everyone's had an opportunity to read them online. Unless there's any changes or suggestions, would someone make a motion to approve the February 26th meeting minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
We only have one case tonight, and it is 22 RAZ04 Bel Canto at Green Level Destination Center. Rob Wilson, Assistant Development Services Director, will share the staff's presentation. Following the presentation, the applicant will share their remarks. All board members will have the opportunity to ask questions of staff and the applicant. Welcome.
Good evening. Bel Canto is a proposal to rezone two properties totaling approximately 35 acres on Green Level West Road. As I'll explain in a moment, this is a big case in a destination center, so this presentation will be a little more detailed than a typical rezoning. Before sharing details related to this rezoning application, I would like to start by making sure that we all understand the context surrounding this proposal. As you know well, the Imagine Cary Community Plan is Cary's vision for how Cary will grow and develop. The plan includes a future growth framework map that identifies the different types of development that are appropriate in Cary. This framework is supplemented by 5 different special planning areas that were identified as needing additional guidance as they are key opportunity areas for redevelopment or new development. This rezoning proposal is located in one of these special planning areas, the Green Level Special Planning Area. The Green Level Special Planning Area is broken down into 5 sub-areas. Denser development is envisioned in the darker areas closest to NC 540, with density decreasing as you move westward towards Jordan Lake. Bel Canto is located in the Green Level Destination Center next to the intersection of Green Level West Road and NC 540. Per the Imagine Cary Community Plan, destination centers are Cary's premier mixed-use centers that include an integrated mix of commercial, office, and residential uses arranged in a walkable pattern with an active pedestrian realm where buildings front on streets. Destination centers are also intended to contain the greatest development intensities found in Cary. The Bel Canto site is located on the north side of Green Level West Road between NC 540 and Beaver Dam Road to the west. Duke Health is located on a 70-acre tract that's immediately east of Bel Canto. Duke Health is developing their site under their rezoning that was approved in September of 2019. Their first building opened in 2022, and earlier this month, they submitted a development plan for a second building. Veritas which is located directly south of Belcanto, received approval of a rezoning last November. The applicant's team met with our Development Review Committee to discuss potential phasing options last week. The Belcanto site is currently located outside of Cary's corporate limits in our ETJ. The site's presently zoned residential 40 and watershed protection overlay district. The applicant's proposing to rezone the 35-acre site to mixed-use district and mixed-use overlay district. The property's northern and western boundary runs along the Bachelor Branch Creek corridor. Cary's GIS maps indicate potential streams and jurisdictional features on the site. Field determination of such features is required at the time of development plan review. The Bachelor Branch Greenway is planned to bisect the northern part of the site, and the portion of the greenway that runs through the site would be constructed as part of the development. As part of the rezoning, the applicant is proposing to provide a connection to the greenway. Ultimately, the Bachelor Branch Greenway will connect to the White Oak Greenway to the south and Thomas Brooks Park to the north. Green Level West Road is currently a 2-lane road with varying right-of-way. The first phase of the Duke Health site has widened the portion of the corridor closest to NC 540 and has installed sidewalks on the north side of the road. Per Cary's planned roadway widths map, Green Level West Road will ultimately be a 4-lane thoroughfare with a landscape median. There are currently no fixed route transit facilities in the Green Level Destination Center. The closest fixed route service is currently 1.25 miles away at the intersection of NC 55 and High House Road. While there are no immediate plans for fixed route transit in the vicinity of the subject property, the applicant has included a condition to provide accommodations for transit stops for future service locations at the time of development plan review. Belcanto has a preliminary development plan that identifies where land uses are allowed, how access and circulation will occur, and many other zoning conditions. In terms of overall development program, Belcanto proposes up to a maximum of 700 multifamily dwelling units, 100,000 square feet of office and institutional space, and 20,000 square feet of commercial space. Given that the Belcanto site extends over 2,000 feet north of Green Level West Road, I'm going to break the site into northern and southern halves in order to better explain where the uses can occur. There are 4 pods that make up the southern portion of Belcanto along Green Level West Road. All 4 of these pods include the ability to have residential and non-residential uses, although only pods 1 and 4 actually include a commitment to have non-residential uses, which is why they are designated in purple. In Pod 1, there is a commitment to include a minimum of 10,000 square feet of vertically integrated non-residential uses, and in Pod 4, there's a commitment to include a minimum of 5,000 square feet of non-residential uses. Pods 2 and 3 could be either residential, non-residential, or a mix. As far as building height, Pods 1 and 2 would be a minimum of 4 stories and a maximum of 7. Pod 3 may also go up to 7 stories, but the minimum commitment there is 2 stories. And Pod 4 is a minimum of 1 story and a maximum of 3. There are 2 pods that make up the northern part of the Belcanto site. Pod 5 is limited to residential uses with a minimum of 3 stories and a maximum of 5 stories. Pod 6 is proposed to be open space with a community gathering space that may include elements such as benches and picnic shelters. A conceptual greenway connection and the envisioned location of the Bachelor Branch Greenway are also shown with blue dots. Belcanto is proposing that a minimum of 80% of the parking spaces in Pods 1 and 2 shall be structured. This commitment is illustrated by the 2 gray squares that you see here on Pods 1 and 2. There are no commitments regarding structured parking in the other development pods, and a surface parking lot is indicated on Pod 5. The proposal does include commitments that structured parking shall not front on Green Level West Road and that there shall be no surface parking between buildings and Green Level West Road. The proposal is also requesting the ability to do angled parking on the private access ways, which are shown here with gray dots, that provide internal circulation and parking for Pods 1, 2, and 3. Speaking of access, Belcanto has 2 streets that serve as the backbone of the site. Street A, shown here in blue, is anticipated to be the first signalized full movement intersection west of NC 540, and it provides eastern access for Belcanto. Street D, shown here in magenta, provides western access and curves to the north and east where it connects with Street A. Given this site's location in the Green Level Destination Center and the fact that it's adjacent to two other recent rezonings, how streets connect to serve the overall destination center is very important. Accordingly, I'm going to add the northern part of the 2019 Duke Health PDP to the east and the 2023 Veritas PDP to the south. When these three PDPs are laid next to each other, it becomes clear that Street A serves as a joint ingress and egress for Duke Health and the proposed Belcanto development, while also aligning with Street A on the approved Veritas PDP to the south. Meanwhile, Street D connects to the east with Street D on Duke Health's PDP, and it also curves to the south where it connects with Street D on Veritas's PDP. So in summary, Belcanto Street Network provides appropriate connectivity with its neighbors, thereby supporting the access and circulation needs of the overall destination center. The Belcanto proposal includes a commitment to provide a minimum of 35,000 square feet of community gathering areas, exceeding the 5,000 square foot minimum requirement in the LDO. In order to guarantee that these areas will be accessible to the entire site, the proposal includes a commitment to provide a minimum of 3 different community gathering areas that are spread across the site, as shown here by the green asterisks with the red circles around them. The PDP also includes an additional sheet with commitments regarding the community gathering spaces. This sheet includes images representative of the types of features that may be included in each gathering space, along with a pick list of 5 or 6 features and a commitment to provide a minimum of 3 of those features. There is a commitment that the selected features will be substantially similar to what's shown in the photos. The character of these areas ranges from urban in Pod 1 to suburban in Pods 3 and 6. The review and determination of what is substantially similar would be made at staff at the time of development plan review. Other commitments in the PDP include separated bike lanes on streets A and D, a condition to provide art at the proposed greenway access point, and a maximum height of 6 feet for any retaining walls in Pods 1 and 2, and a commitment that any such walls would have a decorative appearance substantially similar to the photos provided here from the PDP. Other commitments in the PDP include a commitment to incorporating green infrastructure techniques, such as bioretention areas, permeable pavement, water harvesting, or soil cells, as part of the site stormwater management program, and installing a minimum of 24 EV charging stations with criteria to distribute them across the site, installing conduit for an additional future 24 EV stations, utilizing LED lighting for on-site parking areas, and providing recycling stations for Pods 1, 2, and 5. As far as architecture or building materials, the project would be subject to our standard land development ordinance and community appearance manual requirements. In terms of materials, this means that true mixed-use buildings with non-residential uses, such as Pods 1 and 4, would be required to be at least 75% brick, stone, or masonry. Meanwhile, while multifamily buildings on the other pods would only be required to be 35% brick, stone, or masonry. In addition, in destination centers, there is also the flexibility to use metal panels and/or fiber cement panels for up to 40% of these material requirements. The other 8 community appearance manual architectural elements would also still apply to the development. The proposal does include one architectural commitment. The applicant's proposing that if Pod 2 were developed with only residential uses, the building facades facing Green Level West Road would be 75% brick, stone, or masonry instead of the normal 35%. There are 8 alternative standards being requested as part of the proposed rezoning. The first would allow grading and replanting of the site's Green Level West Road streetscape. The second would decrease the required streetscape width for Pod 2 along Green Level West Road from 50 to 30 feet and allow it to be planted at a less dense, non-residential rate, even if only residential uses are developed on this pod. The third would allow internal streetscapes for streets A and D to be reduced from 30 to 15 feet. All 3 of these requested alternative standards are consistent with alternative standards that were approved for the adjacent Duke Health and Veritas developments in the Green Level Destination Center. The 4th modification would allow 1 champion tree to be removed due to its location in the path of Street D. The fifth standard that's being requested would make it clear that buildings can front on the private access ways rather than a traditional public street. The travel access ways are intended to provide internal access and circulation for pods 1, 2, and 3, much like a drive aisle in a parking lot. The sixth alternative standard would allow angled parking along these internal access ways as long as it's provided in accordance with Cary's standard specifications. The seventh standard would allow vehicular gates to be utilized in parking decks to restrict access and protect parking for residents. And finally, the eighth alternative standard would allow decorative retaining walls up to 10 feet tall in stormwater devices if they're not visible from a public street. In staff's preliminary analysis of the Imagine Cary Community Plan, we found policies in several chapters apply. I'll run through some quick highlights. For the Live chapter, the proposal provides more housing choices for this area. For work, the proposal could enhance locational appeal to businesses and workers. For shop, the proposal supports the development of a limited number of destination centers. For engage, the proposal would provide a greenway segment that's part of our Greenways Master Plan. And for the Move chapter, the proposal would utilize multimodal street designs. With regards to the Shape chapter, the proposal does support mixed use and focuses high-density residential development in a strategic location. Since the site is in a special planning area, though, I'm going to primarily focus on the proposal's relationship to the detailed recommendations for the green level special planning area. When we look at the special planning area, we find very clear goals for the destination center subdistrict. These goals include achieving a vertical and horizontal mix of uses with a focus on employment-oriented uses. 4 to 7-story buildings and structured parking are also encouraged with the vision of creating a highly walkable and active public realm. The key issue that appears to emerge from these destination center goals is whether this development, which is proposing to build up to 700 multifamily units, but only committing to a minimum of 15,000 square feet of non-residential uses, is consistent with the community plan goal of an employment-oriented destination center. While the case could be made that if the anticipated collective development between Duke Health, Veritas, and Belcanto were to occur, Belcanto would serve a primarily residential function in support of the greater whole, there are no conditions linking this project to the timing or ultimate program of those adjacent developments. Thus, whether this proposal's residential focus and dependence on the collective build-out of the adjacent developments has merit is a key issue for the board to contemplate tonight when considering this proposal's consistency with the Cary Community Plan. I'll provide additional details about this later in my presentation. A virtual neighborhood meeting was held on this proposal on April the 6th of 2022. 20 residents attended. Questions and comments were shared regarding the amount of density proposed, traffic impacts, how access is going to be provided to the site, school impacts, and the proximity of the development to the adjacent subdivisions to the northwest. Attendees generally expressed interest and support in the greenway and proposed open space. We have not received any calls or emails since the neighborhood meeting. A public hearing was held at the January 25th council meeting. There were no speakers and no written comments. The council had several comments and concerns that they shared at the public hearing. They expressed support for more commercial space and an increased commitment regarding the amount of structured parking. Council members also emphasized the need to prioritize urban architecture, noting an interest in the applicant committing to more than the 35% masonry requirement for residential buildings in the Community Appearance Manual. Finally, council expressed an interest in a greater commitment to EV charging stations, suggesting more charging ports or at least installing conduit for future charging stations. Noting that the current LDO requirement limiting stormwater facility retaining wall height to 6 feet is for safety, the council expressed concern about the rezoning's proposal to increase the maximum height to 10 feet. Council members also encouraged the applicant to include additional amenities like a playground or a clubhouse in their community gathering spaces. Curiosity was expressed regarding why recycling centers are only provided in 2 of the 5 pods, and concern was shared regarding the height of buildings at the street, with the suggestion that the applicant commit to stepping buildings down in height as they get closer to the edge of the street. Council members expressed support for the separated bike lanes and noted that the destination center is the right place for density and apartments. Several members expressed an interest in the applicant adding a commitment to provide workforce housing for a range of income levels. And it was also noted that the inclusion of smaller units, such as studios, that are more naturally affordable, would also be desirable. Council members also inquired about providing greater clarification regarding the breakdown of residential unit types in each pod, and inquired about including composting near the proposed recycling centers. It was also noted that the proposal to reduce the internal streetscapes from 30 feet to 15 feet in a destination center is reasonable, but it's important that the trees get robust soil systems. And finally, a council member noted that recent data indicates that over 40% of Cary citizens work from home, so having places where people can relax and play near where they live and work is important. Since the public hearing, the applicant has made several changes to the rezoning proposal. In terms of the development program, the applicant responded to the inquiry about stepping buildings back at the edge of the street by reducing their maximum building height from 8 to 7 stories. They also increased their minimum non-residential commitment from 10,000 square feet to 15,000 square feet by committing to construct at least 5,000 square feet of non-residential in Pod 4, in addition to the 10,000 square feet that had already been committed to in Pod 1. The applicant also increased the minimum commitment for structured parking in Pods 1 and 2 from 50 to 80%. As far as architecture and aesthetics, the applicant added a commitment that all buildings fronting on Green Level West Road will have 75% masonry on the facade facing Green Level West Road. Since the vertically integrated buildings in Pod 1 already have to meet this requirement, what this really means is that if there are any residential-only buildings in Pod 2 that would have required 35%, they will now have to do 75%, just like Pod 1. The applicant also expanded the 6-foot height limitation that had just been offered for retaining walls in the Green Level West Road streetscape to include all of the area in Pods 1 and 2. It was also clarified that the Green Level West Road streetscape buffer reduction from 50 to 30 feet includes relief from the typical Type A buffer if Pod 2 is developed as only residential. It is worth noting that this clarification makes this buffer consistent with all the other buffers for both of the adjacent developments along Green Level West Road in the destination center. The applicant also added a playground to the list of potential amenities that could be selected for inclusion in the community gathering space for Pod 6, added a commitment to provide conduit for an additional 24 future EV spaces, and added recycling for Pod 5. Overall, staff finds both consistencies and inconsistencies with Belcanto's proposal. While the PDP proposes urban densities with up to 700 multifamily units and 4 to 7 story buildings in the 2 pods along Green Level West Road, Pods 3, 4, and 5 have the potential to only be 1 to 3 story buildings if the minimum heights are built. While the PDP proposes 80% structured parking on Pods 1 and 2, the proposal could end up with only surface parking on Pods 3, 4, and 5. While the proposal could have up to 120,000 square feet of non-residential uses in an employment-oriented destination center, only 15,000 square feet is guaranteed across 2 pods. So there is the possibility that the site could end up being a 700-unit multifamily development with only 15,000 square feet of non-residential uses. Thus, the key issue as to whether Belcanto's significant amount of residential land use is appropriate in the employment-oriented Green Level Destination Center. And finally, the development does not include a commitment for workforce housing like the adjacent 1,300-unit Veritas development to the south that was approved last November. In terms of consistency with the community plan, though, Belcanto proposes to provide high density in a location where Cary's highest densities are encouraged. And the rezoning proposes to provide multifamily in the only area of the Green Level Special Planning Area where multifamily residential uses are allowed, and for that matter, encouraged. The project also includes multimodal street cross sections with separated bike lanes, and the project delivers necessary connectivity for the overall destination center. When viewed in conjunction with the adjacent Duke Health development, which proposes primarily non-residential employment-oriented uses, and the recently approved Veritas development, which includes 1,300 residential dwelling units, along with a minimum of 170,000 square feet of non-residential, these developments may collectively deliver the desired focus on employment while Belcanto provides opportunities for employees to live nearby. However, if the Duke Health or Veritas developments were to be delayed and or not develop as anticipated under their current zoning, there is the potential that Belcanto could emerge as a predominantly residential standalone development. So on balance, if you believe in the value of the dirt and a Cary Destination Center and believe that everything around this project will be built in the fullness of time, we believe the consistencies slightly outweigh the inconsistencies and would support the conclusion that this proposal is consistent with the Cary Community Plan. This concludes staff's presentation. I'd like to now introduce Mr. Jason Barron, who will give a presentation for the applicant. And afterwards, staff will be available for any questions.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Jason Barron with Morningstar Law Group. Thrilled to be here. This is kind of the final piece of a fairly large puzzle that has been in the works since 2017, 2018. The Duke Health Project, as was mentioned by Rob, was originally zoned back in 2019. Viridis was zoned last year, at the end of last year, and this essentially is the last piece of the puzzle. As noted in the staff report, we had a work session with the council back in December of 2022. Ago now. The purpose of which was to paint the picture about what was going on. You know, the Destination Center speaks to lofty goals associated with delivering employment, making sure you've got residential, making sure you've got connectivity, making sure you've got pallets that match up with each other. What Belcanto recognized when they found this property, what Halley companies who worked on Viridis, who were working on Viridis, what they recognized when they came across their property was that essentially you had three entities coming together who were going to be zoning roughly 90 to 95% of all of the land in the Destination Center west of 540. And so it was a wonderful opportunity for the parties to get together and say, okay, let's take a look at the big picture. We don't have one single master developer. The three of us are going to have to act as pseudo master developers. And that's exactly what transpired. During those conversations, clearly Duke Health is going to deliver employment. I mean, they've got more than 1 million square feet planned for their property along with the hospital, and it's Duke Health. You know, that's what they do. They're not in the business of building residential or commercial. They build hospitals and healthcare facilities. Viridis wanted to do a pretty robust mixed-use project. In addition to doing a lot of apartments, they had a vision for creating office, kind of a true live, work, play opportunity just on their portion of the site. And Belcanto said, we want to do some of that as well, but we view our property as a primarily residential opportunity. And so the parties kind of got together, took a look at the recommendations of the Cary Community Plan, and essentially said, okay, we're going to agree. You go do this, and you do this. And so it has been very coordinated. I tip my cap to each of the three parties involved in this process for having the willingness to sit down and say, okay, what are your plans? What are our plans? And also taking a look and being eyes wide open about the recommendations of the Cary Community Plan. And so, you know, a lot of the inconsistencies that were mentioned in Mr. Wilson's presentations are really inconsistencies because you're only getting a small piece of what is an overall puzzle that is designed to fit together. And, you know, I credit the staff along with my clients for working together, not only to figure out where uses need to be located, but how those uses are going to connect with each other. The amount of work that went in at the staff level relative to creating separated bike lanes, having really integrated and thoughtful ways to move people throughout the district, it's an incredibly unique opportunity to kind of put a stamp on the Green Level West Destination Center and ensure via the zoning process how things were going to work in the Destination Center. Because the last thing that anybody wanted was for the Destination Center to be a vision that ultimately eroded over the course of time in responding to market. And so I believe that the combination of the three cases together certainly demonstrates consistency with the Cary Community Plan, certainly lives up to the lofty aspirations of what the Cary Community Plan calls for in this particular area, and this project is going to be a big part of that. And make no mistake, as I mentioned, Belcanto hasn't hid from the fact that they are a primarily residential piece of this puzzle. That has not changed from day one associated with what we've been working on. And if it was just Belcanto, at the table right now and I was having to stand here and justify why they were just a primarily residential development, I would have a hard time making that argument. The good news is Duke Health has already made their argument and gotten their zoning case approved for the employment uses. Veritas has already made their argument and said we're going to do a minimum of 170,000 square feet of non-residential uses along with apartments. And now Belcanto's turn to codify as part of the zoning how development will work and will work in a way that makes sense not only for the parties but also for the town. And so with that, Mr. Wilson's done a great job of kind of giving you the details of the proposal. We're here to answer any questions that you all may have. We are optimistic that you will agree that when you look at the destination center as a whole, and this, it's one of the neat things about the Cary Community Plan, right? The Cary Community Plan doesn't have parcel by parcel recommendations. It covers large geographic areas, and it includes policies that apply to large geographic areas, and this is no exception. And so, again, I believe the combination of the three parties who have been involved in this process for the better part of 5 years have put together the right plan for them. They've put together the right plan for the town, and it will ensure that development of the Green Level West Destination Center happens in a way that's consistent with the Cary Community Plan. So happy to answer any questions you all may have and look forward to you all supporting the case.
Thank you. We're now going to close the presentations from the staff and applicant and move to board member questions. And I'll start off with a question. Not sure which one of you guys, but I'm totally confused on parking. So just from my personal view, this is a residential development. I mean, I agree with what was just said, and public transportation, unfortunately, is just not going to be a thing for probably a long time, so we're really looking at cars. I think what they've done on the EV side with the chargers, that's really good, but I don't understand if you're looking at, how many apartments are we talking about here?
700. A maximum of 700.
700.
So 700, and do we have 800 parking spaces, 900? What do we have right now? I can't make heads or tails of it.
We don't know how many parking spaces we have right now. That's a detail that will be determined during development plan review if the rezoning is approved. What we do know is the parking that will be provided in pods 1 and 2, the 2 pods closest to Green Level West Road, 80% of the parking provided in those pods would be structured. And we know that there's no commitment to structured parking in the other pods. It doesn't mean they couldn't choose to provide structured parking. It just means for the zoning they don't have to. I'm sure they'll be doing math as they think about the number of units. Surface parking takes up space, to get to 700 residents.
What is the guideline from the planning department right now?
For our
is there-
parking requirements?
Correct. Like 1 per unit, 2 per unit? I know we've changed so much in the last couple of years with parking.
I believe that requirement is 1 space per bedroom, is roughly.
Roughly, so,
And there's a little fraction in there for guest parking as well.
Yep.
and then how do you, so during development, is this an enforceable thing? Is this a guideline?
It's a
How will that work?
requirement.
It's a requirement, perfect.
So they'll come in and say, we're going to build, let's say they build the maximum. We're going to build 700 multifamily, and let's say they build it all as one phase, so it all comes in together. They'll need to tell us how many bedrooms are in each of those units. So let's say of the 700, 500 are 2-bedroom units, 100 are 1-bedroom, and 100 are 3. They'll have to provide a certain number of spaces for the 1-bedroom units, a certain number of spaces for the 2, and a certain number of spaces for the 3. And we'll do the math at that time when we have that mix. And then they'll show us how the parking they're doing in pods 1 and 2, at least 80% of those spaces are structured. And they'll show us how the spaces are provided on the other pods. Whether they choose to do structure or surface is up to them because they don't have a zoning commitment as to how the spaces are provided in pods 3, 4, and 5. Does that help?
That helps a lot because, I know a lot to think about whether they're vertical or not. I mean, I got that, but it just seemed to me that there wasn't going to be enough. And there's nothing worse than not having enough parking when you have a residential development this massive.
Right. Well, and we will also have parking requirements for the minimum of 15,000 square feet of non-residential, and if they build more than the 15,000, they could go up to 120. They'll have to park for every so many square feet they provide of those uses. And there are some opportunities as they, there can be some sharing per the ordinance, there are requirements that have to be met. So it's not calculus, but it's not necessarily simple arithmetic either as we figure out how many parking spaces are required. But the ordinance, we have a lot of detail in the ordinance to address this. And the last point to make is they have wisely, I think, asked to protect parking on upper levels of decks for residences, which is something we often see in mixed-use developments. So they can do gated, separated parking to protect spaces for residents. That's obviously as a mixed-use development. If they have, say, a restaurant on the ground floor, they want to make sure if the restaurant's full, when people come home, they still have a place to park.
Exactly.
So,
And then my only other comment on that is if they do have these structures, or even if they have flat lots, that solar be considered on top of it with cars that can park underneath. I think that's a really coming thing that should be looked at as these things. I know it's not a requirement, but to me, they go hand in hand now. That's the only questions I have. Mike, can we move to you next? You have any questions?
I'm still thinking.
Okay, well, while you're thinking, Chris, how about you?
Yeah, I got several questions. The first question was why I noticed that the green level special planning area policy section had no checks in it. And I was just curious, is that a factor of it's not meeting any of those policies on its own, by itself, but it does meet it in the holistic view that I'm hearing with all the other tracks included? Can you just elaborate on that?
so you're asking when we shared this slide earlier why we didn't have checks on it?
Sorry.
It's all right.
Well, I was referring to the agenda packet that kind of shows the chart where you just have check, 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 check. Yeah. All of them were blank in that section, so I was just curious.
In the attachment?
Yeah, the Cary Community Plan Policy handout.
It's in the backup.
Yeah. Unless I'm looking at no, this is the right one, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be a little embarrassed if we attach the wrong attachment.
Okay,
We-
so there should have been some check marks in there?
Yes. Let me see
Okay,
if I,
that's why I was confused then, okay.
Yeah. I think I have a slide here that, see if I can help a little bit with that.
This
Just
is
a
in the
moment.
packet.
C1.
Yeah, that's right at the end.
Yeah, C1.
Y'all seeing the same thing I am?
Yep.
Okay, just making sure I wasn't looking at the wrong one.
Okay. Well, for the live, work, and shop categories, you should have seen the items that are on the screen now checked in that attachment.
Okay. And then what about the green level special planning area?
All right, let me work my way towards that. And then also, under the engage and move, you should see these items checked on that spreadsheet as policies that are applicable to the proposal. Great, that would be. Okay, so this is the attachment, right? Okay. So let's start on page 1 of your attachment if we can. So do you see the live policy section?
Yep.
I'm sorry, say the what?
The live policy?
Yes,
You should see 2 checks.
correct.
Okay, so you do see that. That's good. And then you see 2 checks under work.
Yep.
And a check under shop. As you move on to page 2,
Hang on,
Well, there's one check under work.
just the top one,
okay,
policy 1.
yep. And
I'm seeing something.
policy 1 is checked?
You have
I
two
thought it was
checked.
policy 2. and
I got 2
policy
check marks on mine.
8.
Work.
You only got
Yeah.
one.
Oh, boy.
Oh, boy. This is 22 REZ 04, correct? Okay, just make sure I'm looking at the right one again.
It's hitting Piney Plains Road.
Yeah, I'm showing
that
policy 2 and policy 8
Okay.
checked. Is that
For work?
Huh?
For work?
Maybe the wrong.
for work?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
I think there's,
Which ones were you all seeing checked?
Oh,
well, there's two
Yeah, there might
Cs.
be. Yeah, there might be
Because,
different.
because the minutes from Piney Plains are mixed in, so you
Got
gotta
it.
get to the,
Okay.
all the way down.
Okay,
Yeah, I think
gotcha,
that's what it is.
gotcha. So yes, 2 and 6.
All right, so it sounds
Two.
like you're seeing
You're right.
the checks that I'm looking at in the attachment. So under engage, goal 1, goal 2 are both checked. Under shape, policy 2 is checked.
So that-
Correct.
And then we don't have anything under Eastern Cary Gateway or downtown or Carpenter or the Green Level Special Planning Area as a whole.
Yeah, and that was the one I was referring to.
Right, so
Okay, yeah, I got it.
probably what should have been checked there is policy 4, supporting development of a signature mixed-use destination center.
Okay.
And then you have move policies that are checked. And that's it.
Okay, so it just sounds like just one check mark was missing.
Right, and
Okay.
what's hard in this, this probably is better to look at. Give me just a second. So our standard table, if you're able to see what I have shared on the screen, these are destination center recommendations. So these are associated with a sub-district. And so they're nestled under, and we don't go to that level of detail in the table that we attach. But these would be things that are kind of fleshed out under policy 4.
Okay.
So where it speaks to green level special planning area, it's largely looking at the area as a whole.
Okay.
Which I shared back on slide 5.
Okay. I think that answers my question. I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't something I missed there. And then do we have any, I did not see the original council hearing, but I noticed that one of the comments they had was for more commercial space. Was there any expectation or guidance provided by council on how much commercial they felt that should be added?
No,
Okay, no guidance,
just
more. Okay.
I think there was a reference to large number of residents that would be living here and
Okay.
thought that more would be appropriate.
And then, I guess my biggest question was why was the commercial added at pod 4 versus on the, I would think that more of the commercial would be along the thoroughfare, along Green Level West Road, and not, I guess, hidden in off the private or the other access way.
I'm going to let the applicant answer. that
Sure.
question.
Because my client sees an opportunity to put a use on that pod that would be complementary to the Duke Health uses, potentially daycare or something along those lines. Don't know exactly what that would end up being, but it was really just based on conversations that we've been having on an ongoing level with Duke Health and putting in a use on that pod that would potentially be complementary to what they're doing.
Okay. All right. The other question I had was about the traffic, and it was more, this is kind of a more general question. I went through the traffic study, and it seemed like there were a lot of improvements that were not being committed to. And some of those I understand were related to the realignment, future realignment of some roads. I can understand that. And some of them, it seemed like maybe they were piggybacking on other improvements from something else, but it seemed like this development wasn't handling many of the recommendations, and I'm just wanted to get staff's thoughts on that, whether there was reasoning for those non-committals, or if they made sense because of something that I didn't catch in there. I didn't have time to go through it and nearly as closely as I'm sure staff has.
I'm going to ask Senior Transportation Project Engineer Priyatham Kanda if he can come down and kind of give you a summary of staff's thoughts.
Okay.
Good evening. So as you've probably seen in many cases, there are a lot of improvements recommended in our traffic analysis reports, and you'll see it's you don't often see every single improvement being committed by a development. So in this particular case, even when we looked at the TAR for Belcanto, it was looked together with the TAR for Veritas as well as Duke. And so if all three developments completed their committed improvements, we should be in good shape, with the exception of the Beaver Dam area. That's something we still need to work on.
Right.
So if other improvements don't happen, then there might be some potential issues. And that's why we have opportunities to work with DOT after the rezoning process to understand exactly what level of improvements they are going to require along Greenville West Road.
Okay, so they've not had a chance to weigh in on this yet?
They had a chance to weigh in, but the applicant didn't have an opportunity to coordinate with them yet.
Okay.
Because they don't come into picture until a development plan is proposed.
Okay, so if I heard you correctly, tell me if I'm wrong, if worst case scenario, some of these other developments did not move forward, and this was the only one, would there still be time to, with DOT's involvement, make additional recommendations that were lost as a result of
There
the
could
other?
be, yes.
Okay.
The developer for this project is committing to pretty much all the improvements along their site frontage for the access to work seamlessly. There are some off-site improvements that need coordination with other developments. That's when DOT is going to come in and make a determination on whether they feel those are required or not.
Okay. And do we have any timeline on the Duke project? Or where they're at in this whole?
That's not mine. They've come in with a development plan for Phase 2, and so they're getting ready to move north of the creek and build the first part of the hospital.
Okay.
So it would be the urgent care.
And what about the other, the Veritas?
Veritas met with us last week to talk about phasing options as they're thinking about they have 6 pods, and they're contemplating how to best proceed in terms of putting in infrastructure and phasing their project.
So it sounds like both of them are already breaking ground or close to it.
Well, Duke has already broken
Yeah.
ground with a 100,000 square foot medical office building and appears to be funded and ready to move forward with the next phase. Veritas, we don't know a lot about their timing, other than they're asking questions and contemplating options as to how they proceed.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all for me.
Sure.
The question about parking was what I had, so thank you.
Okay, Sal?
Question on the green infrastructure. I mean, what's the commitment to that? Is there anything more detailed than that, or it's just, green infrastructure?
It's a commitment to do some things that you're not required to do normally, and it's a detail that's usually worked out as part of development plan review with our stormwater engineers.
Okay. So it has mostly to do with stormwater?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I think it's great that the developers are working together, get the right uses that really work. But kind of the question is just that enforceability. You talked about, developer falls out or he decides to make a big change. Is there any enforceability, or could we have 3 separate developments not working together all of a sudden if something was to go wrong? Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty when it comes to office now, so maybe some office doesn't get built as planned, so.
And that link it to either of the other projects, and in fairness, neither of the other rezonings that preceded it include such conditions either.
Okay. That's all my questions.
Okay. Ken, any questions?
We got 1 million feet of commercial next door is exactly what we intended. I don't think you want to put apartments in between the hospital and its urgent care. You want the apartment somewhere nearby, and I think it was always planned in our thinking when we approved the Duke site that this is what would happen. I think it's exactly what we wanted to have happen to fit the community plan. So I really appreciate that. I will make and I think even to the point that Duke put the tunnel under the road so they could get north and south connectivity without having to go surface was an amazing choice, because now it led to all this being safer and pedestrian and bike lanes. Otherwise, it'd be like North Hills, where people just try to cross the busy street. I think it's great. I did want to ask, when have standards been changed for the commercial parking? I know due to workspace, co-working environments, it seems like there was some changes proposed or made. As staff, have there been adjustments in the last couple of years with people needing more, and then we went the other direction post-COVID to people not working close? Is the number, has that changed as part of this community plan, feeling that this is going to be part for the live part of the chapter, to make sure it's convenient? They've been up and down?
About 9 or 10 years ago, the council reduced the parking requirement for commercial uses. I'm not recollecting, have there been any changes for commercial or office parking since 2014, 2015?
Okay. I know that with Dude Software, we approved more, and of course they went out of business, so there's lots of extra spaces there now.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that was because of more co-working. I guess that's done on a case-by-case basis. So this still fits the old lower parking requirements, or the original.
Yes,
years ago.
by changing the minimum, we've reduced the number of spaces that larger retail uses need. And Cary has seen some redevelopment. An example would be the Lowe's out at Crossroads, where the Verizon building that got built in the parking lot, that was a direct reflection of the reduced parking that was needed. And so they ended up with extra spaces, and they used that to add some outbuildings.
Awesome.
So, but yes, we reduced parking for commercial uses about a decade ago.
Okay.
It seems to have been working better.
Great. Yeah, acres of asphalt when they don't have cars on it, it's just, it bugs me. And again, someone mentioned solar panels. I think, Steve, you mentioned solar panels. I think not only, I wanted it on the library parking deck. I want it downtown everywhere. I think we need the top floor of the parking decks need solar panels. But especially if we want the residents to park at the top, is that I always park next to the top to stay out of the sun. And, but if there's an opportunity to do that, I think they're going to make their own decision, but it certainly would make a better parking situation for people. If you go to Dallas or go to the southern cities, and it's covered parking is everywhere, and it's for apartments, it's everywhere, that people do not want to park their cars in the sun. But I think it'd be a great use, but we have no requirement, but that's the only comment.
All done? I just had a quick question also go back to the parking. Pod 3, there was no commitment for recycling or covered parking, but it could potentially be 7 stories. I guess maybe this might be a question for you to answer. I was just wondering what the process of decision-making was for that.
The recycling center question is really just a matter of trying to figure out, as these pods come together, whether we need to have a recycling center on each individual pod. We know pods 1 and 2 are going to have them. There's the possibility that those will be set up and be conducive to pod 3. We just don't know the answer to that right now. With respect to parking, the reality comes down to the financial cost associated with it. With trying to do structured parking on pods 1, 2, and 3, structured parking is incredibly expensive. It's impressive that they're able to wire in structured parking, in my estimation, for pods 1 and 2. Pod 3, they have the possibility of doing it. Obviously, you're not going to build 7 stories of apartments on pod 3 without some ability to stack parking at the same time. So that's really going to be a product of figuring out, when that pod develops, what market will support, candidly.
Okay. And then quick question about the EV stations, also something that you brought up. I think there was a commitment for 24 with another, I think that one of the commitments was to double that. Is that still going to be enough? I know we talked about the number of spaces per the number of units and the number of bedrooms and the number of bodies in the cars. It just seems like a really small number when you're looking at potentially 2 cars per unit, could be 1,400 cars.
Right. Yeah, and again, I think that what those are minimums, and they are trying to forecast, my client is trying to forecast what demand will be. It's tough to figure out where that demand is going to be. They're going to put in EV charging to support their future residents, and so there's the possibility there could be 50. We just don't know exactly what that number is going to be.
Okay. Yeah, it just seems to be a like really unbelievably low number based on, I mean, the fact that this is going to be mostly residential. I mean,
Right.
We're all on the same page there. Okay, well.
Well, and I'll clarify, and I'm an electric vehicle driver, and I also live in an urban setting right now, and I could tell you that the condo building that I live in downtown Raleigh has probably 400 residents in it, and there's 4 electric vehicle charging stations. And the reason why is that you don't need to charge your car every day at those EV charging stations. I mean, I've never had a problem having access to the EV charger when I needed access to the EV charger. And this is just anecdotal and my experience, but 24 sounds like a very small number until you consider the fact that those parking spaces don't need to be designated for each driver in order for them to gain access to the charger.
Yep, understand the
Yep.
concept. How about the workforce housing? What is the decision, what is the background on the decision not to?
Not to include a workforce housing condition. Part of it comes down to the market, and part of it comes down to the financial commitments that they have with their lenders, and those lenders not believing that they can get credit for a workforce housing condition in this case. I will tell you, and the data has shown, and I think was talked about at the most recent council meeting, maybe the one before, from 2022 to 2023, apartment rents have gone down in the Triangle market. And a big part of that is because the Triangle has been building so, there's multiple ways to tackle the affordable housing situation that we are all very aware of. One is you can put a condition in. Another is supply. You build units. And so we believe the approach we're adopting here isn't foreclosing the possibility that these will be attainable at the 80% AMI level. It's avoiding having a commitment that we're worried is going to interfere with the ability to finance the development at all, but will still provide opportunities for folks at a broad range of rentals. Because again, rents are in fact going down, and you may be surprised that the vast majority of apartments that are on the market in Cary today are at 80% AMI. And there is a lot of supply, and there continues to be a lot of supply, and that's good because we continue to grow. We're growing fast.
No, that's fine. I was just more focused on because of this is a, special district, and
Yep.
this is one of the focuses of being able to provide affordable housing for people that may not otherwise be able to afford it. So,
No, I understand that completely, yeah.
yeah. Okay, I think that's all I have.
Did Veritas had a affordable housing component, right?
They did. They had 5% overall of their units are affordable, 2% at 60% AMI, and 3% at 80% AMI.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so there's some in the area, but.
Yep.
Some in the area, but it's difficult because, one of the things that stood out that you said earlier is that, looking at this specific instance, looking at it, the 3 together, it's consistent. But if you take one out, then that changes things. So we're just going on the assumption that all 3 are going to be going forward, and it's going to be all one big happy family. But if, one of the puzzle pieces is taken out, there's going to be a hole.
I don't disagree with that. Again, I think the Cary Community Plan is structured in that way. And we have the unique opportunity here because these properties are being zoned.
Right.
And so what happened with Duke was zoning. What happened with Veritas was zoning. What Belcanto is doing here is zoning. So if things want to change, they're going to have to go back through the rezoning process. So it's not just a matter of, well, the plans fell apart and now we're going to do, 1,500 apartments here with no commercial. That has to go back through a zoning process,
Right.
just like this. Yep.
Yep, understood. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Sure.
Back to EVs. Are the charging stations, are they going to be basically like superchargers? In other words,
overnight charging, or are they going to be fast charging? Just because it does go to, 14 units per one station, and that's what the 48 actually put in. It's actually more than 14 units, which, great, everybody may not have it quite yet, but by the time that this comes to development, so are these, a fast charging unit that are looking to be put in?
Yeah, and there is no specific commitment with respect to that. It's going to be EV charging stations. The ones that are, the charge point is, or they're kind of the leader in the market. They do what I would consider a level 2 charger, which is the one you would attach to like your house. And so you can plug in at night and you're charged throughout the course of the night.
Okay. Back on solar, not just for parking, but actually just for, the roofs of the structures. I don't think there's a mention of that either. I know there's green conditioning for, wastewater treatment, but I think, a condition for solar for everything makes a lot of sense, being able to take advantage of that up front. Is that been discussed or?
It's not part of our development plan.
Okay.
No.
And then the other thing too is you are right next door to what should be a healthcare mecca.
Yes.
And you're talking about a market, we're talking about workforce and employment, but there's another demographic that is going to be looking heavily, that's going to want walkability.
Seniors.
Which is going to be seniors.
Absolutely. Yes.
And, that's a demographic that, will need affordable and downsized housing. Is that being talked about and considered? Because you just mentioned market, is what will the market bear?
Yep.
And that's a different, definitely a different, market than young families.
And there's no denying that. And my client views this opportunity as being unique. And that is, they know that there will be a health mecca next to them. They know that that will create a lot of interest for seniors wanting to be here. So that's definitely part of the active planning process in terms of who they see their renters being. There's no doubt about that. Yep.
Okay, just because, I'm just looking at this going, why wouldn't you want to put everything right there?
That's right.
Why
Yep.
wouldn't you want to walk across the street? So I know it is meant for employment, but that is also something we need to consider, as that's going to be a choice and an opportunity for people as they live.
Yep. No doubt about that. Yep.
Yeah, I think that's very good. I remember that one of the discussion things about putting Duke Health out there was, we got all these 55 and up developments out there, and we got to get a hospital closer to them so they don't have to go to Wake Med. It's just a longer way to go. It's better service. So I agree, this is entirely a great thing for seniors. Absolutely.
Governor Luke, back to you. Thank you. Rob, has there been any discussions or applicants or sketch meetings about, it seems like there's a parcel in between Duke and this one up in the corner of the L.
Right. That piece of property is owned by Duke Health.
It is owned by Duke Health.
Yes, and they came in with a rezoning to expand the hospital use from 100 beds to 500 beds. And then they had some changes in terms of the business program, so they withdrew the rezoning. But that rezoning was proposing to include that as part of their greater assemblage. So at the moment, it remains separate from their zoning. And of course, being owned by Duke Health, it's not part of this zoning either. So yes, there's a 10-acre, it was 10, 11-ish acre piece up there that currently is in the destination center, but hasn't been pulled into the MXD rezoning yet.
Gotcha. Okay. And can we talk a little bit about the town of Cary owned property that's just to the northeast? That's a park, or it's going to be a park?
Well, it's currently land that we own. There is, there's been some discussion about it being a park, but there is, at this point, there's no money. There's no funding for a specific use. There's been some discussion about perhaps expanding trails, cross-country course, things like that. But at this point, we don't have a designated project to move forward with a use. So it's currently undeveloped town-owned land.
Gotcha.
There is a fair bit of jurisdictional stream and floodplain area that meanders through the portion of that land closest to the Duke Health site.
Okay.
Good. Any other last questions before we close? Okay, in that case, we'll close questions by the board members, and we will move towards motions. Would someone like to make a motion for 22 REZ04 Belcanto at Green Level Destination Center rezoning? The words are up on the screen.
I would love to.
Go ahead.
I move that the board find 22 REZ04 is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans for the reasons set forth in the staff report, presentation, and our discussion by the Planning and Zoning Board.
Would someone
I'll second.
Second, okay. Ken, since you made the motion, any comment?
I think it's what I made earlier. I think that I'm excited. This takes us where we want to go, I think, and I'd love for other developers to see that you work with the ones next door to you to get something better than if you just, I think about these little things we got going on Piney Plains Road where they don't, they get what they can and they do what they can. This is just a more holistic approach. I think this would be a great thing for others to do. It's a great example.
Perfect. Chris, you?
No, I think the same thing, and my only concerns about was the just how it was being built and coordinated with these others in the timeline. But I agree, it all makes sense together as one destination center.
Okay, are there any other comments, especially if there's anyone that would not vote for this? Any other comments?
The only comment I would make is that it's not a slam dunk for me. I think assuming the positive, it makes all the sense in the world. But I'm super conservative by nature, and your slide with the inconsistencies makes you really stop and think. So I think in general, I'm in support, but it's not.
I just like to, this is an interesting case. This is fascinating. It's a very unique thing, and I think the one thing, and Mr. Barron spoke to this, if this case were coming for you tonight, and the Duke Health and the Veritas had not been approved,
right,
I would be up here. I would have jumped up several times saying, remember, it's not, we can't, we know that this developer is saying they're going to do this, but we can't rest on that. We have to rest on what they're committing. This is unique because we have committals from those other places. And as Mr. Barron said, if something falls through, they have to come back before you with the rezoning.
Yeah.
And so, Andy, I think I think your concerns and the concerns that have been voiced in that manner are valid, but this is a unique thing that we have the rezoning locked in. And I wanted to bring that up because I also don't want this process to confuse you all the next time one comes in that this isn't present. So this is a teaching moment in that we have these, this is a unique case. As Ken said, we haven't done this before. This hasn't happened yet. And so that kind of confuses things a little. But just to put that in perspective on what we've got going on.
Understood. No, that's a good point. I appreciate that. No, and I am in support.
Yeah, no, I am definitely not trying to sway you one way or the other. That's not my role here. I just want to make sure.
But I just wanted to get that on record.
Yeah, really, honestly, really, I'm up here so the next time one of these cases, as I said, I'm selfishly up here so you guys don't get confused the next time a case comes where we don't have this. But I do think it bears mentioning in that, again, yeah, I would have jumped up. So I caught myself one time. I was about to, I'm like, oh wait, nope, Veritas was approved, Duke was approved. This is a different beast. Right. So I just want to make sure we're all on the same page on that. Because that does have a very big bearing on your view of this.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I live not too far from where all of this is happening. So all that traffic going down to Highway 55 and High House right there. I was reading this with all sorts of intent. Understanding this will have an impact even on me, even though I'm not like right in that little circle. Thank you.
I'll just add to that unexpected additional commentary that the market obviously does influence a lot of things. So sometimes we do see rezonings of rezonings. So the only constant over time is probably change. But I think Matt makes some excellent points. And hopefully you appreciate the staff's thought process as we look to present this to you.
Very much so. It was very well done.
There are definitely consistencies. There are definitely inconsistencies. And and we look forward to you all concluding your motion.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for your comments. I was really thinking the same thing. This is very unique with all the cases that I've seen. This one is, and we say this a lot, but it is unique because we normally do not look at one and then kind of refer back to others because we can't dictate these things. But in this case, I do have a lot of faith in it. I would tell you, I would not support this if it was a standalone. I really would not. It would be very easy for me to vote against this. But having said that, this is a residential. It's to support what will hopefully be a massive employment center. There's a lot of work to be done with the parking and all that. We always know that you guys work through all that. So having said that, I too would support this based on what we know today. And I wouldn't be shocked at all if we didn't see 1, 2, or 3 of these come back for adjustments later. So not even in the least bit. Are there any other comments before we vote? Okay, having said that, all in favor of the motion that's been put forward, please say aye. Any opposed? It carries unanimously. Thank you, Rob. That was a lot.
Thank you.
That is the only case we have tonight. We do have new business, and that is an update on the Imagine Cary Community Plan from our Chief Development Officer, Scott Berry. And this is really, if you remember a while back, Cassie was in here. She gave us stuff that we could read. Of course, it's all online. So this is really just a follow-up to that. Is that correct?
That's it.
Okay, perfect.
Good evening, Chairman Crutchfield and members of the board. It's great to see you all. I was going to have to say maybe one of the first things I'd have to change of the Imagine Cary was that checklist, but it sounds like we got it worked out. So.
They don't miss anything. You know that.
I'm glad about that. So, yeah, you're exactly right. I'm just here probably first to say thank you. I've seen a couple of you online making comments, so I appreciate that. I've got a real quick presentation to run through, probably take a couple seconds, and if there's any additional feedback, I'd be glad to take it, and you still have a couple days left to add comments online. So we got a new cover. That's the purpose of this slide. What did the interim update do? Just to remind you all, it's the preface. We did a new preface. Lots has changed since the time that we did Imagine Cary. Particularly, we had the pandemic. We've changed some of our cultural stuff. We've added task forces and potentially on Thursday a new board like the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Board. Some of our demographic numbers have changed, so that's going to be included in the preface. In the Live chapter, we've adopted the housing plan, and so we want to incorporate that housing plan into Imagine Cary. So we're doing that. One of the biggest things was Enrich. We had our environmental section in the serve section of Imagine Cary, and we've separated that out. Or there was some commentary from citizens that, hey, the serve is written for staff, for the town functions, and we want something that's written for all of Cary, environmental, particularly all of Cary. So that's what we did. We pulled out the environment. It's in its own section. It's called Enrich. And then serve, we added some new town functions, and we made sure that any department that didn't feel like they maybe had enough mentioned in Imagine Cary was mentioned in serve. So we added things like 3-on-1, we added an organizational development group, and maybe beefed up a couple of the other departments. And so I went over that, but what has changed in the preference? It's implementation. We talked about sort of changing in the community, talked about what we've learned. These are the new goals of the housing plan that's already been adopted. They're now going to be incorporated into Imagine Cary. These are the goals of Enrich, and we took these goals from the Serve chapter, so all this stuff that you see that we comment on in cases, we say it meets the Serve chapter, that's going to now be called out in Enrich. So the really focusing on how are the development plans, how's new development meeting environmental features. So things like solar, if someone were to offer that condition, now we didn't get one tonight, but if someone were to offer that condition, that would be called out. And you'd see that called out in some of these, maybe policy 5, improve energy efficiencies and sustainable energy processes. Serve chapter, this is really talking about now just town operations. How does the town operate? How are we making sure that we're doing the right thing for the Cary community? We did add policy 6. That's the only new policy that was added, but it's really talking about equity, inclusion, high-quality services. We're going to add the word accessibility in there. We heard that from our DEI board. That was important. And so again, this is available online. I'm happy to jot down any notes you have tonight, but yeah, online until the 31st. So you still have a couple days to add anything else. And again, just thank you all for doing your part. And of course, this is a unique one because you guys will see it come back in the actual, just like a rezoning case, it will go to public hearing at council. It'll come before y'all, and then it will go back to council for decision. So with that, I'm here for comments or.
I got one comment for you. I sent
I'll
this
take
in,
it.
but I was really glad to see policy 1 to protect existing neighborhoods. That to me is going to be so important. You know, one of the worst things that we deal with now, especially on infill, is people that want to take a cul-de-sac and make it a through street and build an 8-story building next to a 30-year-old neighborhood. You know, to me, I don't know there's enough emphasis. It doesn't seem to be, as an observer, that we're protecting these existing neighborhoods. And it just, every one of these things that come up where there's a lot of controversy, it's because the existing neighborhood, you know, the people that moved in there, nothing, and I know nothing lasts forever, but there's like a statement in here that says, talking about changing, it says, good opportunities to evaluate a change to more appropriate fit of use that's coming in a changing environment. That sounds really good unless it's you.
Yeah.
And then you're not real happy about it. So to me, I just hope that really continues to be a really big focus, because we really, I feel sometimes when we hear these presentations that we lose focus on what made Cary great, and it wasn't apartment buildings. And, you know, I'm just really glad to see that in there, and I hope you guys really take that one super serious, because it's just going to be so important in the future.
It's perfect. Thank you.
Great point.
Any other comments? I'll just throw it open to anybody.
Yeah, I found the walkability and well-connected living developments was a good language to keep in there, put in there, because even looking at this mixed-use development we just discussed, it would have been great if there was a connection. I know there's a greenway, but there's residential neighborhoods. If you're riding a bike, it would be nice to connect into the other neighborhoods, not talking cars, but just some way of connecting residential neighborhoods with sidewalks, things like that. So maybe seeing a little bit more of that, or becomes a requirement at some point, that would be great, personally.
Katie, will the bike plan have to come back here? So one of the items that we are working on, kind of outside of this, the Imagine Cary plan tries to get all our plans together, and our Parks, Recreation, and Transportation Board, or groups, are working on a bike plan specifically. So that will be something that, this is coming first, but at some point you all will see that update too. So we'll take the policies from this, and then the bike plan is really like, how do you take those policies and implement them? And then hopefully have either the town or developers build those connections.
Yeah,
But thank you.
that'll be great. Just knowing, having kids, you know, riding bikes will be nice to be able to get to places.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yeah.
You know, as we know, as councils change, direction changes, different things, I think what's codified is really important. There was an issue on High House Road where development went in, and it was totally impractical to connect to Prestonwood. Totally impractical. The elevation just could not put a road in there and meet road standards. But the council stood fast and made them put a bike connectivity. But the council could change, and that could go away. So what has to be codified is something so that the council would have to override. And that brings me to my point about we have these encouragements to do electric EV parking. We have encouragements. There's whatever those number of cars per bedroom, we figure, and guests, but when will it be codified of X number of electric parking stations per apartment or per whatever? Then they don't have a choice to offer, so they can offer more, but I think that's got to be codified so that we don't pick and choose. We like somebody and they say they're going to do some nice things, and so we go for enough EVs in because it's okay because they put 6 EVs in, you know, that's okay. But somebody else, we don't like 24, we want 48. If it were a rule, then I think that would be a positive thing. So I'm encouraging that staff gets behind council's desires on this and makes it codified so we don't get this wishy-washy numbers. I think we've talked more about EVs than a lot of that, right? And y'all did way before I got here, I noticed.
Yep.
But then solar, then that brings solar to a point, is that when is it going to be codified that there's solar on top of office buildings and solar on top of apartment buildings? Or are you going to codify that it's going to be green with garden on top to keep cooling or whatever? You can do that on top of it, because they had discussions at the Fenton why there weren't more rooftop gardens. But those are the things that I would wish would get filled out so it's not iffy. Oh, it kind of fills this one. It's kind of, and that's when the check marks get fuzzy to me. And I would say also in the existing, in which you mentioned, Chairman, this, when you move in next to an R40, I almost feel like realtors ought to make you sign. I realize I'm living next to an R40 that's left over, and I realize it may change because it's just not fair for the average person to move in. But what really bothers me is when the developer zoned it, and part of the zoning, they did it a certain way, and then you move in, and the developer says, whoops, sorry, I mistook the market, and besides your a dog kennel, you know, whatever it is that we're going to do because we can't sell any more lots because of whatever. And that bothers me more than the R40 being rezoned, but that's an education thing. But I think that's a good point. So.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Thank you, sir.
All right, appreciate y'all. We'll be back.
Thank you.
Having said that, that's all the cases in new business, and with that, we'll call the meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.